partner.
We could take dance lessons.
No, why do that? We can.
That'd be fun.
Ultimately, Kody agreed to take a dance lesson, but not before he delivered a unique line in a confessional.
We're going to go dancing, and you will not be my accessory. You will be my partner.
We gotta practice that, because I don't think you know how.
You're asking if I could be tamed? Well, I am a monogamist now, so maybe I can be tamed. Then again, there's always a wild man in here.
At 47, Robyn Brown, Kody's sole remaining wife on Sister Wives, has revealed the 3 toughest challenges of their shift to monogamy: constantly managing Kody's rejection-fueled self-sabotage and mood swings from 3 divorces, leaving her emotionally exhausted, the complete lack of resources or guidance for supporting a husband through plural marriage fallout while rebuilding intimacy under public scrutiny, and navigating Kody's intimacy fears and struggles with undivided attention as he questions their passion and admits monogamy feels unfulfilling, forcing Robyn into daily recommitment amid a marriage she describes as its worst phase. People often refer to Robyn Brown as the preferred wife, but what if she is genuinely responsible for the demise of Sister Wives? Let us examine how the most silent individual on the program triggered the most dramatic downfall in the history of reality television. There arrives a moment in every enduring reality series when a cast member so completely depletes their own narrative that continuing to document them becomes an act of artistic irresponsibility. For Sister Wives, that distinction belongs entirely to Robyn Brown, the self-appointed victim of Flagstaff, champion of minimum contribution, and TLC's most puzzlingly overcompensated peripheral presence. It is almost beautiful in a dark way. Previously, the program centered on the turmoil of polygamy, the envy, the practicalities, the idealistic fantasies of a man who believed plural marriage equaled endless devotion. But presently, following almost 20 years of disorder, televised in high definition, the emotional core of the program has been diminished to a woman who seems allergic to expression. Robyn communicates in brief sentences, displays happiness once every lunar cycle, and executes motherhood and devotion as if she is following a stage instruction she no longer accepts. According to the constantly repeated justification, Robyn is silent because she is shielding herself from public examination. The narrative proceeds something like this. She has read the remarks, she has listened to the criticisms, and now she protects her every word like it is a confidential matter. The outcome, nevertheless, is not composure or discretion. It is television preservation. What previously was a program about complicated human feeling has transformed into a display of self-protection where Robyn recites statements written for her by producers and terms its substance. Every scene that features her feels manufactured down to the smallest detail, a calculated parade of producer-supplied confessionals where genuineness goes to perish. When Robyn communicates, she does not disclose, she practices. When she weeps, she does not collapse. She executes the act of collapsing, and when she apologizes in that melodic, sugary sorry tone that could decay enamel, it arrives with all the genuineness of a campaign statement. Viewers are not observing a woman managing family conflict. They are observing a compensated actor forget her statements. The issue, nevertheless, is not merely Robyn's dullness. It is the reality that TLC continues rewarding it. The network's readiness to finance this emotional absence suggests either unconditional devotion or a stunning misinterpretation of entertainment. The solution is almost excessively straightforward. Terminate her contract. Eliminate her from the camera completely. Allow her to withdraw to her doll collection and faded foundation palettes in tranquility. Because what precisely does Robyn provide now? She is not supplying storylines. She is not enriching the narrative. She is not even trying to be pleasant. She is an anchor, but not the type that stabilizes. She is the type that pulls the entire production to the ocean bottom. Every frame with her in it feels like padding. Every confessional feels like a duty. Even her on-screen marriage to Kody, once promoted as the great love story that validated his deterioration, has descended into a dull representation of codependency and mutual bitterness. And it is not as if the audience does not recognize. They do painfully. What previously was hate-watching has descended into background noise, the televisual equivalent of folding laundry to the sound of a car crash that has already occurred. Many viewers now confess to skipping through her scenes completely or depending on social media summaries rather than tolerating another minute of her flat, colorless presentation. The woman could make a hostage negotiation sound tedious. Perhaps the most accidentally humorous part of Robyn's character is her self-fashioned image as the shy one, the timid introvert misunderstood by the harsh world. Shy women, nevertheless, do not accumulate husbands like treasures. They do not deliver patronizing speeches on national television or present passive-aggressive apologies through clenched teeth. What Robyn calls shyness is simply strategic self-removal, a tool utilized to avoid responsibility while preserving control. And control, make no error, is her preferred activity. She is the silent conductor of the Brown family's continuing discord, the soft-spoken manipulator whose every teardrop functions as a signal for Kody's next explosion. Every time she feigns delicacy, he rushes to protect her, rewriting history and blaming his ex-wives in the process. Robyn's performance as the delicate, misunderstood woman is not about vulnerability. It is about authority. It is about understanding that Kody's ego can be directed by a shaking voice and a well-timed cry. Her "I accomplished my mission" comment about marrying Kody, once dismissed as an awkward expression, now appears like a confession. The mission evidently was to obtain lifelong financial security without ever exerting effort. While the other wives labored, sacrificed, and raised children, Robyn perfected the craft of selective fatigue. She always appears tired, as if permanent weariness could be confused for substance, and yet her sleep deprivation seems conveniently connected to her inability to establish boundaries with her children, who apparently enter into the marital bedroom every night like phantoms in search of attention. Whether those interruptions are genuine or theatrical is irrelevant. The pattern is evident: the perpetual crisis, the permanent inconvenience, the continuous reason she cannot quite participate in life. Even her insomnia has a narrative purpose. It functions as another excuse for why she cannot film, cannot engage, cannot be present. It is a performance of domestic martyrdom so excessive it borders on mockery. Meanwhile, her aesthetic, the faded hair color, the washed-out foundation, the permanent look of mild irritation, reflects her energy. She appears perpetually under fluorescent lighting, drained of color, both literally and figuratively. How a woman with access to professional stylists and a network paycheck manages to appear so perpetually unconcerned by her own appearance remains one of reality television's lasting mysteries. But perhaps the real tragedy is that Robyn's blandness has contaminated the entire program. Her emotional stagnation has become infectious. The scenes that previously pulsed with genuine tension, arguments, jealousy, confessions, now play like a funeral procession of feigned civility. And the few moments of authenticity that slip through are almost always unfavorable. A sharp tone here, an eye roll there, the unmistakable flicker of contempt when someone else speaks too long. The real Robyn, glimpsed only in microseconds, is not the shy, wounded soul she pretends to be. She is impatient, controlling, and unmistakably resentful of anyone who refuses to orbit her. It is not that viewers demand perfection. They simply demand participation. Sister Wives was once compelling because everyone involved was at least attempting to make plural marriage work, to preserve their dignity, to project some ideal of unity. Robyn, nevertheless, has abandoned even the pretense of attempting. She is a luxury model of laziness, coasting on the fumes of her own mythology while the audience begs for an ounce of honesty. At this point, it is unclear whether she even enjoys Kody's company. Their interactions oscillate between awkward and hostile, a series of pained smiles and forced laughter. She treats his attempts at affection as inconveniences, responding to his grand declarations of love with the energy of someone tolerating a telemarketer. Her body language screams discomfort, her tone indifference. It is the sound of a woman who won the prize and immediately regretted entering the contest. If TLC insists on keeping this charade alive, the least they could do is impose conditions. Limit Robyn's appearances to 2 or 3 scenes per season, preferably ones that do not involve her mistaking monotone recitation for emotional nuance. Let Kody stumble through the wreckage of his life without her, as his crutch. If he cannot produce watchable content without invoking her name, that alone should tell the network everything it needs to know. Because the audience is finished subsidizing this farce. The show's remaining viewers are not fans. They are anthropologists watching the slow decay of human sincerity under fluorescent studio lighting. They tune in not for entertainment, but for morbid curiosity. How much more artificial can this get before someone pulls the plug? And that truly is the legacy Robyn Brown has crafted, not as a dynamic participant in a cultural experiment, but as the cautionary tale of what happens when self-pity becomes a production strategy. She began as the supposed savior of Kody's spiritual empire and ended as its most lifeless relic. The favorite wife has become the franchise's fatal flaw. At this stage, mercy would look like cancellation for Robyn, for Kody, for the exhausted audience still squinting through the smoke of their delusion. Because if this is what passes for reality television now, a woman reciting pre-approved lines in exchange for a mansion and a manicure, then perhaps it is time to let the cameras rest. The tragedy of Sister Wives is that its most carefully protected character is also its least interesting. And the tragedy of Robyn Brown is that she got everything she wanted: the husband, the house, the control, only to discover she has nothing left to say. There was a time when Kody Brown seemed like the perfect protagonist for a long-form sociological experiment. A man convinced that his hair, charisma, and spiritual mission could hold 4 households together. Years later, what remains is less profit and more parody, a middle-aged narcissist performing leadership to an audience that has already left the room. Kody has become the television equivalent of a motivational speaker at an empty conference hall. He still gestures, still pontificates, still deploys the vocabulary of command, mission, covenant, loyalty, but the effect is tragic. Every sermon on family unity comes from a man whose offspring avoid him like a contagious ideology. Every grand declaration about honor comes from someone who weaponized affection and then blamed the victims for bleeding. The irony is that Kody still believes he is the hero. He speaks as if he is the misunderstood patriarch of a family too weak to appreciate his genius, a visionary whose disciples have abandoned him for lesser gods named independence and therapy. In truth, he is a cautionary tale about what happens when self-adoration replaces self-awareness. His favorite phrase, battle buddies, perfectly captures the absurdity. He uses it to describe himself and Robyn as if surviving the grueling trials of monogamy in a $1 million house were equivalent to trench warfare. Apparently, being a full-time parent for once in his life constitutes combat. He calls it an active phase of parenting, as if tucking in teenagers were a new frontier. The rest of the world calls it Tuesday. For decades, Kody floated between households like a traveling salesman of affection. Whenever conflict arose, he simply packed up his ego and relocated to whichever wife still tolerated him. The arrangement suited him perfectly. Perpetual novelty, minimal responsibility. Only now, confined to a single house and a single partner, he is forced to experience the full weight of domesticity for the first time, and he is visibly miserable. Watching him complain about being too busy with the kids is unintentional comedy of the highest order. He behaves as if basic parenting were an act of martyrdom. The man has 18 children and yet seems personally affronted by the discovery that they require attention, boundaries, and effort. When he moans that he and Robyn are so busy they barely have time together, one imagines the exhausted parents of the world collectively laughing into their laundry piles. His obliviousness would be funny if it were not so cruel. This is the same man who publicly declared that he was never attracted to one of his wives on national television with their children watching. Few sentences in reality, TV history, have revealed more about a person's moral decay. The problem is not that he lacked attraction, it is that he lacked basic empathy. There are thoughts one keeps private out of decency, especially when those listening share the woman's face. That moment was not an aberration, but a symptom. Kody's entire public persona rests on a pathological need to dominate every narrative. Even when doing so humiliates those around him, he confuses cruelty with candor and narcissism with honesty. The more he speaks, the smaller he becomes. His dynamic with Robyn only amplifies this grotesque theater. She feeds his delusions of grandeur, and he rewards her with unwavering devotion. Every time she sniffles, he rewrites family history to cast her as the long-suffering heroine. Every time she whispers about feeling unsafe, he brands the rest of his family as villains. Their relationship operates on mutual enablement. She validates his victimhood. He bankrolls her indolence. Together, they have built an echo chamber lined with self-pity. Meanwhile, the other wives, those inconvenient reminders of his failed spiritual empire, exist only as narrative props for his self-justification. If they express hurt, they are bitter. If they move on, they are betrayers. If they stay silent, he accuses them of emotional abandonment. In Kody's world, everyone else's autonomy is a personal attack. Even his brief excursions into external projects revealed the same pathology. On Special Forces, he presented himself as a rugged survivor, proof he imagined that the world still found him compelling. Instead, viewers were treated to a masterclass in delusion, a man desperate to impress actual adults, stumbling through exercises that exposed his fragility. When his fellow contestants mocked his plastic intensity, comparing him to a Chucky doll, it was the first honest critique he had encountered in years. At home, he compensates for the loss of control by rebranding his stagnation as destiny. His current marriage is not a failure, but a refinement. His alienated children are not estranged, but choosing their own paths. Every disgrace is relabeled as evolution. The language of accountability simply does not exist in his vocabulary. And yet, for all his bravado, Kody remains dependent on the very system he dismantled. Without the show, without the wives he discarded, without the children who once gave him storylines, he is just another middle-aged man with a camera pointed at his midlife crisis. He needs the chaos to feel alive. The family may have been a spiritual experiment for the others, but for Kody, it was a perpetual validation machine. Now that the machine has stopped feeding him admiration, he has resorted to manufacturing it himself. Observe his interviews, the hair still theatrically tousled, the eyes wide with self-importance, the sentences looping endlessly back to his favorite subject, himself. He speaks of love as if it were a battlefield, of leadership as if it were martyrdom. He presents himself as both victim and victor, a man simultaneously persecuted and chosen, its performance art masquerading as confession. His cruelty toward Meri in particular reveals the depth of his hypocrisy. The same man who once wrote her love letters now insists he never loved her, as if rewriting their history could absolve him of responsibility. Watching her sift through those old letters, proof of affection publicly denied, was one of the few genuinely human moments left in the series. Her confusion and pain underscored what Kody's theatrics always conceal. He inflicts harm, not out of malice, but out of absolute self-absorption. He cannot fathom that other people experience emotions independent of his script. What makes him so infuriating and so endlessly watchable in the way that car wrecks are, is his refusal to evolve. Every confrontation becomes another sermon about how misunderstood he is. Every plea for accountability becomes an opportunity for him to flex moral superiority. He is a man at war with reality, losing spectacularly. Robyn, of course, is his chosen audience. She feeds his delusions with a steady diet of sympathy and manufactured tears. He calls her shy, mistaking manipulation for meekness. She nods along, eyes glistening, as he laments his ungrateful children and treacherous ex-wives. Together, they have built a fortress of self-pity, insulated from truth and consequence. The tragedy is that their isolation is self-inflicted. They have spent years portraying themselves as victims of public misunderstanding, while simultaneously living off the very audience they claim to despise. They demand empathy, but offer none. They broadcast their dysfunction, then condemn viewers for reacting. The hypocrisy is so dense it could be used as building material for another Coyote Pass. Mansion. Kody's relationship with his children is the clearest reflection of his decay. He speaks of them as if they were employees who failed to meet performance expectations. When they challenge him, he frames it as rebellion. When they withdraw, he calls it disrespect. He cannot comprehend that love requires presence, not pronouncements. His paternal instinct extends only as far as the camera lens, and yet buried beneath the theatrics there is a faint glimmer of something almost pitiable. Kody is not evil in the Shakespearean sense. He is simply hollow. He built his identity on being the charismatic center of a sprawling experiment, and now the experiment has ended. The wives have left, the children have grown, and all that remains is the echo of his own voice. The audience once tuned in to see whether polygamy could function in modern America. They stay now to witness one man's spectacular inability to function without applause. Each episode is a study in denial. Each confessional a monument to misplaced confidence. The hair may still bounce, but the empire has collapsed. If Robyn represents the death of authenticity, Kody represents the death of self-awareness. Together, they have turned what was once a cultural curiosity into a cautionary tale about ego, delusion, and the dangers of believing one's own publicity. He has become the kind of man who mistakes notoriety for relevance, a man who thinks that being filmed is the same as being interesting. And so he dances, literally and figuratively, clumsily leading a partner who clearly wishes she were elsewhere. The sequence of him attempting to learn choreography was unintentionally perfect. A man out of rhythm, insisting he is in control, bewildered by the simple act of coordination. It was more than bad television. It was metaphor. Kody Brown, forever out of step with everyone around him, convinced that the problem lies with the music. For viewers who have endured this saga from the beginning, his transformation from patriarch to parody is complete. What remains is a shell of self-importance, orbiting a woman who mirrors his worst qualities. The soulmate narrative he pushes so desperately now reads as satire, the kind of forced devotion reserved for couples with joint Facebook accounts and mutual delusions. The most merciful outcome would be silence, cameras off, contracts closed, the Browns left to face themselves without a production crew to mediate reality. Until then, Kody will continue performing his one-man tragedy, mistaking pity for admiration and chaos for content. In the theater of modern reality television, few characters have managed such complete self-destruction on screen. Kody Brown, once the self-styled prophet of plural love, has become its most enduring punchline. Every television show dies twice. First, when its story ends. Second, when its characters refuse to leave. Sister Wives should have taken its final bow years ago, perhaps around the time its titular family stopped being plural and started being painfully ordinary. Yet here it remains. A slow-motion autopsy on the corpse of polygamy, prodded weekly by TLC producers determined to squeeze one more ounce of ad revenue from the remains. The show once sold itself as a sociological experiment. Could modern American plural marriage coexist with love, faith, and legality? It answered that question long ago, and the answer was a resounding no. What began as a messy, intriguing portrait of domestic utopia gone wrong has devolved into the televised equivalent of chewing gum someone else dropped on the sidewalk. Today, the premise is gone, the family dissolved, and all that remains is the echo of Kody Brown's voice, narrating a life that no longer exists. His wives, formerly co-conspirators in a shared delusion, have become independent women with separate storylines. Yet none of them can seem to stop circling the gravitational black hole that is their ex-husband's ego. Every conversation eventually drifts back to him, as if the man's spiritual vacuum has consumed not just their marriages, but their screen time. Christine, once the audience's heroine, has transformed into something of an accidental rerun. Her liberation from Kody was thrilling, an overdue revolt against narcissism disguised as theology. But freedom, it turns out, does not make for riveting television. Post-Kody, she is stuck in emotional syndication, endlessly rehashing her pain for diminishing returns. Every episode begins as a declaration of independence and ends as a recap of old grievances. For someone who claims to have moved on, she spends an astonishing amount of airtime talking about the man she left. Her new marriage, while heartening in theory, has only deepened the problem. The audience was promised a fresh chapter, a narrative of healing and rediscovery. What they received instead is a succession of hollow scenes in which Christine and her new husband discuss Kody's shadow, like amateur therapists on a loop. Even their affection feels reactive, as if every kiss were a rebuttal to past humiliation. Happiness might be good for the soul, but it is dreadful for ratings, and TLC's editing has made sure to wring every drop of nostalgia from her joy. Janelle fares slightly better, if only because pragmatism has always been her brand. She does not bother pretending that plural marriage was anything other than a logistical nightmare. Her independence feels genuine, but her storyline feels recycled. How many times can one woman declutter, downsize, and rediscover herself on camera before it becomes an infomercial for emotional minimalism? Even her occasional digs at Kody sound tired now, muted echoes of earlier, sharper seasons when their bickering had weight. Then there is Meri, the ghost still haunting the franchise. For over a decade, she has smiled, giggled, and waited for affection that will never return. Watching her is no longer tragic. It is unsettling. She has become a ritualistic presence performing her own denial for the camera's benefit. Even her rare flashes of self-awareness are followed by renewed submission to the same man who publicly erased her. She is no longer a participant in the show. She is an exhibit. And through it all, the production keeps stitching together scraps of narrative, as if repetition could pass for relevance. Every tell-all promises revelation, but delivers rerun. Every exclusive interview replays footage of Kody discovering again that his wives dislike him. The editors seem as weary as the audience, looping the same emotional sound bites over new B-roll of Arizona sunsets. The rare moments of sincerity now come from the children, many of whom have fled both the faith and the cameras. Their absence says more than any confessional ever could. They have recognized what the adults refuse to admit, that the show's central relationship between the Browns and their audience has become parasitic. The viewers feed the family's income. The family feeds the viewers schadenfreude. It is a mutually exploitative arrangement disguised as entertainment. TLC, of course, is complicit. Rather than end the series with dignity, the network continues to parade the Browns as living relics of a failed social experiment. Each new season is marketed as a reckoning, yet nothing reckons. Kody blusters, Robyn weeps, Christine reflects, Janelle recalculates, Meri dithers, and the credits roll. The result is not a show, but an endurance test. Proof that mediocrity can outlive meaning if the ad revenue is good enough. The creative bankruptcy is especially glaring when compared to what Sister Wives once was. Early seasons offered something raw, real jealousy, real confusion, real glimpses into a belief system most viewers found alien and fascinating. Now those same themes have ossified into formula. Every emotional beat is prepackaged. Every conflict feels like contractual obligation. What was once anthropological is now anesthetic. Even the show's visual language betrays exhaustion. The confessional chairs, the sterile living rooms, the slow zooms on tearless cries. Every aesthetic choice screams fatigue. The editing rhythm has slowed to match its subject's inertia. The only suspense left is whether the cast will finish a sentence before the audience changes the channel. It is tempting to say the show should simply end, but that underestimates the gravitational pull of spectacle. Sister Wives has long since transcended its content. It now functions as a kind of cultural mirror, a reminder of how easily dysfunction becomes comfort when consumed in small familiar doses. The audience does not watch for plot anymore. They watch for habit. They have been conditioned to accept mediocrity as intimacy, boredom as authenticity. There is, however, a perverse poetry in the way the Browns' empire collapsed. The show began as an advertisement for spiritual abundance, more wives, more love, more faith. It ends as a monument to scarcity, no trust, no warmth, no connection. What remains are fragments of people orbiting a delusion that no longer pays emotional dividends. Kody and Robyn, the self-proclaimed soulmates, now perform monogamy with the enthusiasm of people trapped in a contractual hostage situation. Their once grand declarations of destiny have curdled into defensive interviews about narratives and editing. The chemistry they once weaponized to torment the other wives has evaporated, leaving behind awkward silences and unconvincing smiles. Their version of happiness looks suspiciously like regret. Meanwhile, the other women's attempts at reinvention are constantly undermined by the show's structure itself. No matter how many new ventures or relationships they pursue, the cameras always drag them back to the same subject. Kody, the man they have outgrown, remains the gravitational center of their storytelling because the network insists on it. The irony is almost Shakespearean. A patriarch who destroyed his family's unity, still dictating their relevance from the ruins. Even the moments that should feel triumphant, Christine's wedding, Janelle's independence, Meri's final goodbye, carry the stale scent of production interference. Viewers sense the staging, the retakes, the hollow applause. Nothing spontaneous survives the editing room anymore. The result is emotional taxidermy, the appearance of life, perfectly preserved and utterly lifeless. There is a certain symmetry to the show's decay. Each wife once believed she was part of something eternal. Now each is performing the aftermath of that delusion. Their collective refusal to disengage from the camera's mirrors, Kody's refusal to disengage from his own mythology. The Browns are no longer a family. They are a franchise, endlessly franchising their pain. If Sister Wives were honest, its final season would be a quiet one. No confessionals, No rehashing of old betrayals, just silence. A camera panning across Coyote Pass, the empty lots where dreams of a communal utopia once stood. Maybe a tumbleweed rolls by. For symbolism, it would be poignant, elegant, and mercifully brief. But honesty, like polygamy, has never been the show's strong suit. Instead, TLC will likely continue milking the carcass. There will be more tell-alls, more contrived reunions, more pseudo-therapy sessions where no one learns anything. Kody will keep auditioning for empathy he has never earned. Robyn will keep pretending her silence is virtue. Christine will smile through gritted teeth. And the audience, equal parts exasperated and enthralled, will keep watching because endings, even bad ones, are addictive. In the end, Sister Wives became the very thing it once sought to critique. A relationship sustained entirely by performance. The family performs love. The network performs storytelling. The audience performs interest. Everyone is pretending, and everyone knows it. And so, as the credits roll on yet another joyless season, the show stands as a monument to its own futility, a cautionary tale about what happens when television forgets the difference between documenting reality and embalming it. The great irony, of course, is that the experiment succeeded after all. Sister Wives proved that plural marriage can indeed survive, so long as there is a contract, a camera, and a willing suspension of disbelief. But it also proved something far less romantic, that love without accountability curdles into spectacle, and spectacle without sincerity collapses into farce. Polygamy did not kill the Browns. Performance did. And TLC, ever the beautiful undertaker, is still there to film the funeral. The lights may dim, but the illusion never sleeps. Subscribe and we will keep naming the ghosts.